Good morning, Rivertree Community Church. How you doing? This is my wife, Dee Dee.
How's it going?
I am Nick, and we're going to go through announcements that would be in your current if we were meeting together, but we're not, so you got us. I'm going to let her intro a little bit because we have very elaborate. I've been hearing that on Nick's notes sometimes it's hard to see, so I want to make sure I have time to be a little bit more elaborate this week.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work on that a little bit.
So how's everybody's week going? I hope you're doing well. We had a little snow this week.
I need a color.
A little weird last week.
Some green.
Yeah.
Is that good? Okay.
That's it. That's all I got.
And we are unable to do haircuts. Go to get your haircut.
Right.
I generally go out to get my haircut. So you gave me a haircut this week.
I did. And they can see it when you turn your head.
Yeah. So.
Not that far.
Oh, right there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm rocking the mullet.
It's called a modern mullet.
And there's many of you out there that maybe have never seen me without a hat at all. So that's new to you. And then it's tricky because here it's he's okay. And then here it's rock on, baby. I gotta keep drawing. Okay, so we ready to get on with the announcement?
We are ready.
Wait, time out. I have a very special thing related to mullets. I know that you have wondered what Pastor Andy might look like with a mullet. So that's my first note today that I just drew up. This one's just black. There's no color on it. But that's what Pastor Andy might look like with a mullet. So if you ever wondered if he should cut into a mullet, you should encourage that.
I like the soul patch.
I'm gonna throw notes this week. Something different. Okay, so first real announcement. Here we go. What do you got?
Hot Air Jubilee.
Yeah, I gotta touch up my picture a little bit.
And Nick has a little visual aid.
Yeah, so Nick's notes, hashtag Nick's notes. I added some color to this. I went retro old school with the hot air balloon today. So sorry it's a little rough. I worked on it just starting just now at the beginning of announcements.
That drives me crazy.
It does.
And Jimmy Fallon when he just...
Oh, okay.
When he throws
sounds
them.
good. So tell the people, this is just to save the date for the Jubilee now. We run the Kids Kingdom at the Jubilee.
Rivertree runs the Kids Kingdom. It's a pretty huge undertaking, so it's an all hands on deck kind of a thing. And so right now you need to mark your calendar.
Just a second, I'm drawing a calendar real quick.
Mark your calendar for July 23rd through July 26th.
And I did this quick, so bear with me. July 23rd through 26th. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so mark your calendar, set that time aside, be ready to help out during that time.
Don't plan any vacations for that weekend.
Nope, you're in Jackson that weekend.
Yep.
Okay, next. Oh, this isn't readable. I gotta color this in while you talk a little bit.
So we are doing text to give pretty much exclusively because you can't really put any offering in the giving box at church. So text to give, super easy. Just text the number 84321, 84321, and you want to put your amount. Seriously!
Okay, here we go. That was the last one, I promise. Okay, 84321.
And you're going to put the amount that you want to give. Also, wonderful news, our gas to groceries money is all the way at...
Almost $3,500. Over $3,400.
Over $3,400.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. So any money that you would typically have in your budget for your fuel for the week to get you from place to place, instead you could put it in this gas to groceries.
Where we're trying to meet the needs of Rivertreeers that might have some financial needs during this time.
Yep.
And if you know anybody that could use some help in that area, you can email. We have special email address for that now. We are super efficient. help@rivertree.church.
Is that right?
I hope so. help@rivertree.church. I think that's right. It's got to be rivertree.church. That's what Andy's email is. help@rivertree.church. And the way you do that with text to give, I also have a visual aid for this. You put the 84321 at the top, and then what you're going to fill in is $25 G2G. And then you will get a text.
It is not $25,656.
No, it's $25 G2G. And then you will get a text back that says, thank you. I spent a lot of time. I told you I had to go quick today. So that's what you do.
G2G.
G2G.
So you would do it as a different transaction from your regular
Correct. Your
offering.
regular giving, if you just put a number in there without the G2G, it's going to go to the general fund. That's your regular giving. If you add the G2G, it goes to gas to groceries. And we appreciate everybody that's contributed to that. Next was last.
Oh, the Zoom meeting.
Online Zoom meetings,
You wanna connect
online
with somebody.
connecting times. They're a little different this week. So if you've been doing those in the past, there's one time that's a little different this week.
Yep.
So we have Tuesday at 7 p.m. Tuesday at 7 p.m. Oh, crap. I really wasn't going to do that anymore. Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Notice how he's covering my face of disappointment.
Not well. Thursday and Friday at 11 a.m. are the others. So Tuesday at 7 p.m., Wednesday at 9 a.m., Thursday and Friday at 11 a.m. if you want to connect with some people from church.
Information for that is on the Rivertree
Facebook page and the
you'll get the
Rivertree.
Zoom meeting.
You'll get the little
link.
Zoom meeting link. I think people have been engaging with it well. You know, it's how we can connect in these times. So thank you so much for joining us at Rivertree today. Yeah, I don't have a good ending.
I know, nothing.
This was my pretend drawing
Sayonara.
Nick's notes when I was trying to pretend that I didn't print some of that other stuff up. Behind the scenes. It's like behind the music. Behind the scenes of Nick's notes. Okay, have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Morning by morning, I wake up to find the power and comfort of God's hand in mine. Season by season, I watch Him amazed in awe of the mystery of His perfect ways. All I'm in need of, His hand will provide. He's always been faithful to me. I can't remember a trial or a pain He did not recycle to bring me gain. I can't remember one single regret of serving God only and trusting His hand. All I have need of, His hand will provide. He's always been faithful to me. This is my anthem, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. God has been faithful, He will be again. His loving compassion, it knows no end. All I have need of, His hand will provide. He's always been faithful. He's always been faithful. He's always been faithful to me. Through the eyes of men, it seems there's so much we have lost. As we look down the road where all the prodigals have walked, and one by one the enemy has whispered lies and led them off as slaves. But we know that you're God, yours is the victory. We know there is more to come that we may not yet see. So with the faith you've given us, we step into the valley unafraid. Yeah. show the world that you alone can save. You alone can save. As we call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. As we call out to dry bones, come alive. So breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God. Breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe. Oh breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God. Breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, yeah. Oh breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God. Breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, yeah. Oh breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God. Breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe. As we call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. As we call out to dry bones, come alive, yeah. We call out to dry bones, come alive.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior's ransomed me. Like a flood, your mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to flee, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secure. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior's ransomed me. Like a flood, mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below would be forever mine. Will be forever mine. You are forever mine. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior's ransomed me. And like a flood, mercy reigns.
This morning, we are going to start a new series. We're going to be spending the next 4 weeks looking at our vision, looking at who we are becoming as a church. We're going to look at where we've been, where we are, and where we hope to go. When we talk about our vision, we talk about it using 3 very short statements. We say that we want to become people who love recklessly, who live passionately, and who serve selflessly. Love recklessly, live passionately, and serve selflessly. Now, those are very short statements. And over the course of the next several weeks, we are going to unpack each of those and talk about what we mean. But this morning, before we go there, we want to start by telling our story. And this is something we do once a year also, is that we take time to tell the story of Rivertree. And we do this for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I think that it's important that churches don't lose their stories. No church is where it is today without God having done many, many, many things to get it there. And so we want to take time to remember and to celebrate the work of God. The second reason is that I think that it's important that we each find ourselves in that story. It doesn't matter if you've been a part of Rivertree for 10 years, 10 months, or 10 minutes, you are a part of what God is doing at Rivertree. And so my hope is that you will see yourself in this story. Now, one of the benefits of this virtual venue is that I'm going to be able to take you to some of these places, and we're going to be able to have those conversations while we stand in those buildings or at those buildings. And so I think it's going to be kind of a fun adventure. Before we start to go those places, let me just lay a little bit of groundwork. So I was the youth pastor at Trinity Wesleyan Church here in Jackson for 7 years. And back in 2006, I started to feel God shifting something inside of me. And I realized that it was getting to be time for me to move out of youth ministry, but I didn't know where he was leading me. That year on Memorial Day, my wife and I, we went on vacation. And the Sunday before Memorial Day, we visited a church plant. And as we walked out of the door that day, we looked at each other, and there was something about that experience that had resonated with us. And we began to take this idea of church planting seriously for the first time. And something that we discovered as we looked into it is that right now in the United States, the most effective way to reach people for Christ is to plant new churches. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, and we don't have time to get into them in this space. If you want to explore that more, give me a call, and when we can finally get back together again, we can have coffee, and I would love to explore church multiplication with you. But we began to set off down that road, and it started with something called church planter assessment. We went to this 3-day process where we explored our wiring and how God had gifted us. And from there, we began to just take one step at a time towards planting Rivertree. We started gathering with our launch team in September of 2007 in the basement of a house on the south side of Jackson. And we gathered with about 20 people or so once a week, and we would pray together, and we would dream together, and we planned together, and we started to form this community that would eventually become Rivertree Church. Our launch Sunday was the second Sunday of February 2018, and we launched from the Plaza Cinema movie theater here in Jackson. And I think that we might as well just go there and talk about the rest of the story from there. And so we launched on a very cold February morning from the building behind me. The AMC Theater here in Jackson is where we held our first large-scale gatherings. The adults in one theater, and we took a couple of other theaters, and we created children's ministry spaces in that space in between the seats and the screen. Every Sunday we had to get here really early and carry all of our gear in and then clean it all out really quick before the movies started for the afternoon. But we found pretty early on that this setting wasn't conducive for the type of church that we were trying to launch. You see, something we realized was that people came in and they would come and they would get their coffee and their muffin, and then they would sit down like they were waiting for a movie. They would whisper to the people that came with them, but they weren't connecting with each other. And we did some things to try to shake that up, but nothing seemed to work. And so we made the decision that we needed to look for a different space to gather, one that would be more conducive to building community, which is what led us to the YMCA in downtown Jackson. Let's head over there and we're going to continue our story. When we realized that the theater wasn't going to be the space that would really help us grow into the church that we wanted to become, we started contacting other organizations and other spaces. And it wasn't long before we connected with the YMCA in downtown Jackson. At the time, it was being directed by a man named Clark Heater. And Clark was a great guy who really wanted to see the Y used for Christ. And he had worked with church plants in the past at a previous Y that he had worked with. And so he brought us in and we began meeting at the YMCA that summer in 2008. And we were at the Y for 4.5 years. The Y was a great partner with us. We loved being able to meet there, and we loved being able to interact with the staff and the members. They made me the chaplain of the Y, and which basically was a title that gave me an office in there, so I could actually have an office space. And we did joint activities with them, and we really enjoyed our partnership with the Y. But it also wasn't easy. Our years here were difficult years. When we launched at the theater, we launched at about 115 people, give or take a little bit. And then from there, we grew that to about 95 people. And then we grew that to about 65. And we were at 65 people for several years. And there's nothing wrong with being a church of 65 people, but it was incredibly hard to pay the bills. So there were quite a few weeks where I just got paid whatever was in the offering plate. And we were having a difficult time connecting with new people and bringing people to Christ and growing. One of our board members, Nick Rush, he jokes that there were weeks when our setup team came in and set up everything, and then our worship team came in and led worship for the setup team and their families, and then I got up and I preached to the setup team and the worship team, and then we all tore it down and went to Wendy's for lunch. And that's not totally far off from the truth. After being here for about 3.5 years, I began to sense this stirring that it was time for us to move. But I would tell people we can't. We don't have the money. We can either pay our rent or our utilities, but we can't pay both, and that's not going to work out. It was around this time that I went on a backpacking trip. And we were in a place called the Red River Gorge in Kentucky. And the first day of the trip, I fell and I hurt my ankle. And I wasn't able to keep hiking. And so we ended up finding a camping spot on the side of the mountain. I ended up sitting in a tent for several days in the middle of Kentucky in the backwoods with nothing to do. But on my Kindle, I had brought a book by a man named Mark Batterson called The Circle Maker. And one of the challenges in the Circle Maker is to pray for big things. In fact, he says that as Christians, we would never say that there are things that are too big for God. We just know that that's not a good thing to say. But there are things that we don't pray for. And in not praying for them, that's basically what we're saying, is that we really think that this thing is too big for God. And on that hillside, I felt convicted that God had more for Rivertree, but that we weren't inviting him into that I was trying to do it all on my own. And so I felt impressed that we needed to start to pray for 3 things. We called it 2050 free. And we were praying that year we would see 20 people come to Christ. We prayed that year we would see 50 people join us in our mission. Remember, at this point, we were a church of 65. And the last thing we began to pray is that we would be given a building rent or mortgage free. These were all things that were way bigger than we were, but they weren't bigger than God. And over the course of the next several months, we began to see God answer those prayers. We began praying those things in June, and we began to see people come to Christ. We began to see more people joining us. And then in that following February, I got a phone call that really changed everything. Somebody said on the other end of the line, I don't know who you are, but 3 people have said your name to me in the last 18 hours, and we just need to talk. And so I drove out to a building at 3113 Lansing Avenue to have a meeting with a couple of people. We're going to head over there, and we're going to continue that part of the story. And so I drove out here on a Saturday morning to the building behind me to meet with 3 people. They had been a part of the effort to campus a church here in this space. So a campus is an extension of another church body where you continue that mission of that church. And a church in Albion had decided they wanted to campus here in Jackson, and they had spent a lot of time and energy and effort converting this old Elks Lodge into a place that a church could meet. They launched that church, but after only 4 months, the pastor decided to pull the plug on the project. But there were people who had been a part of that effort, who had poured energy and effort and resources into the space behind me and wanted to see it used as a church. One of those people was a man named Phil Tripp, and he was the one who had called me to ask me if I wanted to come and meet. And so we met in this space, and they told me their story, and I told them our story. And we began a month-long discernment process. For that time, we actually operated as if we had 2 locations. So our worship team would play at the YMCA, and then they would come and they would play for the few people that were still gathering here in this space that were left over from that church body that had been here. And I would preach at the Y, and I would come over here and preach. And then after a month, we had a meeting between the leaders of the 2 groups, and they asked if we would be willing to move Rivertree out to this space. Now, here's the other part of it. If you remember, we had been praying that we would receive a building rent or mortgage free. And a part of the blessing of this space is that the Resale Depot resale store was committed to paying for the rent. They committed to paying for the rent for the other organization, and they were committed to paying the rent for us as well. This all happened in 2013 when we moved out here. I'm filming this in 2020, and the Resale Depot has paid every rent payment, and now we own the building. We purchased it about a year and a half ago, and now our mortgage payments are supplied by Resale Depot. Speaking of Resale Depot, that's really the next chapter of the story, and I want to swing over there so we can explore that for a little bit. In 2015, the next chapter of our story started. I mentioned earlier that when we moved to our facility on Lansing Ave, that the Resale Depot resale store at 2390 Wildwood was committed to paying for our rent. See, the store was founded in 2008 to help fund ministry, specifically at that time to fund the ministry of Jackson Christian School. A few years later, a man named Phil Tripp had bought the store and had expanded that mission to funding other ministries as well, including us. In 2015, Phil approached us and asked us if we as Rivertree would be interested in receiving the store as a gift. And so we have continued that mission of using the store to fund ministry. In fact, we talk about the mission of Resale Depot this way, that the mission is to utilize excellence in resale to fund avenues where people can find and fall in love with Jesus. Now you might ask what that means. So we take random items. Let's say in 1983, you went to Holland, Michigan, and you bought a wooden shoe. And for a while, you had that wooden shoe somewhere in your house. But that wooden shoe has migrated from a shelf to a place of lesser significance and then to a box in your basement. And now you're cleaning things out and your significant other looks at you and says, it's really time for that to go. You have a couple choices. You can throw it in the trash or you can donate it. And if you donate it, if you put it in a box and bring it down to the store, we will clean it off and put a price tag on it and put it out on the floor. And somebody will buy that shoe. And we can then utilize the funds from that to fund ministry. Now, where does it go, you might ask? Where do those funds go? So they go to a couple different places. The first is that they continue to help fund our facility expenses at Rivertree. That was the original commitment when we moved to the building, and we continue that today. So we still receive money that helps to pay for our mortgage and for our utilities, for our facility expenses. The other place the money goes is that it goes to partner organizations. And these are organizations that come into the store and they volunteer, and then they receive a percentage of the proceeds based on how many of their hours were volunteered compared to the percentage of overall hours that were volunteered in that time period. And so, for instance, Jackson Christian Schools continues to receive money from the store. They have volunteers that come in. They have parents and grandparents and classes that come in who volunteer, and then they receive a portion of the proceeds as a result. Every year since we've taken over the store, we've given away somewhere between, I believe, $50,000 and $70,000 a year to these partner organizations, which absolutely blows my mind. There were many years at the beginning of Rivertree where that was more than our annual budget. And now the Lord has made it possible for us to be able to give away more money than we received in a year when we first started this adventure. Another organization that receives funds from the store is Freedom Point Church Planting Network. And that is a network that we are a part of that helps fund church multiplication efforts. And so we've been able to help fund 5 church plants over the last several years. And so when you, as a part of Rivertree, volunteer at Resale Depot, those hours go to help fund church multiplication. And so if you have an extra hour or two during the week, we would love for you to come down to the store and volunteer. There's no experience necessary, and there's lots of different places where you can help out. You can help out greeting people as they come in the door. You can help by putting price tags on items, by sorting clothes, by cleaning things, by picking up. We really do rely on our volunteers to make the store go. We have an amazing paid staff who are core and do an amazing job, but we also couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. We absolutely love our volunteers, our donors, and our shoppers. So if you're looking for something, if you need some clothes, come down to Resale Depot before you check out the retail stores in town. You just might find a bargain, and you help us fund ministry in the process. I tend to think about the story of Rivertree in terms of chapters. So there was the chapter of our launch and our time at the theater. And then there was the chapter of our time at the YMCA and the chapter of the transition to our space on Lansing Avenue and the chapter of Resale Depot. And they're not cut and dry chapters. They tend to overlap each other. But there are a couple of other chapters that I wanted to make sure that we spent some time just celebrating what God has done. So one of those chapters is our special needs adult program that we call SNAP. So about 4 years ago, I learned that a church in town called Cascades Wesleyan was closing. And it's always sad when a church has to close. But Cascades Wesleyan had a ministry that I had known about and appreciated from a distance to special needs adults. It was led by a woman named Carol Williams. And when I found out that the church was closing, I got a hold of Carol, who I had known for quite a few years, and we began a conversation about whether it would be a good fit for SNAP to move to Rivertree. And I am so glad that it did. It moved to Rivertree, and it has continued to grow, and it's become a very important part to us of who we are. In fact, over the last year or so, we've decided to just even change how we see SNAP and how we talk about SNAP. We now want to see it as a third gathering of Rivertree. Something that we've realized is that for many of those special needs adults, that is their church. And they do all of the things in that space that churches do. They worship and they learn and they fellowship together, all of those things that make up a body of Christ. And so when we talk about the gatherings of Rivertree, we have 3 gatherings. We have one at 9 o'clock on Sunday and one at 10:45 on Sunday. And then we have another one at 6:30 on Tuesdays that's designed specifically for special needs adults that's led by Carol Williams and her team. And they do a fantastic job. And I am so glad that SNAP is a part of the Rivertree family. That is another chapter to our story that's important to us. A second chapter that we have just finished is that of the last year, a chapter that we'll call Making Spaces. So we spent the last year renovating our facility. We realized that the finishes and the flooring were getting pretty worn, and there were things about the layout that we needed to change in order to be able to minister to more people. And so we started raising money, and many of you gave to that project. Many of you gave money, many of you gave time and energy. And over the last year, we redid the flooring in almost all of the facility. We took out a couple of offices that were in the entryway, It used to be when you entered into the building, you basically entered into a hallway, and now we have created a nice open foyer space that's inviting for people to come into, and a place where people can gather and share coffee and connect with each other. We also optimized our kitchen, so our building has a great industrial kitchen in it, but it was bigger than what we really needed. And so we still have the industrial kitchen space, but we took some of that space and created a new classroom that we needed for Sunday mornings and to be able to use throughout the week. In a back hallway, we created a prayer room and a workspace and just made better use of those spaces for what we need. We just wrapped up that year of projects just really a few weeks ago. And this morning was supposed to be our party Sunday. It was going to be the Sunday that we celebrated the completion of those spaces together. And we will still have a party Sunday. It will just be sometime in the future. So a natural question is, what is our next chapter? And honestly, I think that we are living it right now. As we have entered into this time and this space where we have been forced to learn what it means to be the church when you can't gather as the church. I think this is an incredibly important and pivotal time, not just in the history of Rivertree, but in the history of the church as a whole, as we have had to learn this new method of gathering with each other, but also of being invested and engaged in the world around us. Something that we've always talked about is the fact that the church is not the building. That yes, we have this space here on Lansing Ave, and yes, we invested time and energy this year renovating it, but the reason we did that was so that it could be a better tool for ministry, but it isn't the church. You are the church. And I hope that this week that you will go and that you will live into that identity. Next week, I do want to invite you to join us as we continue to talk about our vision. We're going to be talking about what does it mean to be people who love recklessly. I hope that you'll join us for that. We'll see you next Sunday. I love you.